The great chamber of the Galactic Concorde stretched for nearly a mile in every direction, its ceiling so high that clouds actually formed near the top on humid days. And Ambassador Yellen Vasquez had learned to hate every inch of it. She stood at the far end of the assembly floor, in the section reserved for what the elder races called developing species, which was their polite way of saying species that do not matter yet, around her. The representatives of 1,000 worlds sat in their designated areas, some breathing oxygen like humans, others surrounded by methane bubbles or floating in anti-gravity fields because their bodies could not handle standard planetary conditions. The Verthini delegation occupied the center of the chamber, as they always did, their crystalline bodies catching the light and throwing rainbows across the walls. And their lead ambassador, a being called Setherian, was speaking in that musical voice that somehow always managed to sound like it was talking to a child. The Concorde acknowledges the petition from the Terran delegation, Setherian said, and Yellen felt her jaw tighten because she knew what was coming next. However, the Assembly has determined that the matter of the Hollow Fleet incursions into Terran border space does not meet the threshold for Concorde intervention. Yellen stepped forward, her boots clicking against the ancient stone floor that had been walked by species who had achieved interstellar travel when humans were still figuring out fire. With respect, Ambassador Setherian, we are not asking for intervention, she said, keeping her voice steady even though she wanted to scream. We are asking for defensive technology. The same shields and weapons that the Concorde provides to any member species facing existential threat. A ripple of what might have been amusement passed through the chamber, and Yellen saw several of the elder race delegates exchanging glances that she had learned to read over her 15 years of diplomatic service. The Terran species has been a member of this Concorde for only 200 of your years, Setherian replied. The Verthini alone have been members for 6 million years, and in that time, we have learned that young species must face their challenges alone if they are to grow strong. 30 million people live on New Valencia, Yellen said, and she heard her voice crack slightly. The Hollow Fleet has been raiding our outer colonies for 3 years, and our intelligence suggests they are massing for a major assault. Then your people must defend themselves, another voice said, and Yellen turned to see the Morthic delegate, a massive creature that looked like a bear made of stone. All species face trials. This is the way of the universe. Yellen wanted to ask them how humanity was supposed to defend against a fleet of biomechanical horrors with ships that were centuries behind Concorde standards. But she had learned that such questions only made the elder races more dismissive. The petition is denied, Setherian announced, and the musical quality of the Verthani voice suddenly sounded like nails on glass to Yellen's ears. The Terran delegation may submit a new petition in 1 standard year. The session ended, and Yellen walked out of the great chamber with her small delegation of human aides, none of them speaking because there was nothing to say in her private quarters aboard the Terran diplomatic vessel. Yellen sat alone and stared out the window at the stars, and she thought about New Valencia, about the families there, about the children who would never understand why the galaxy had decided they were not worth saving. Her communication console beeped, and she saw it was a message from Earth, from the Office of Terran Defense, and when she opened it, her blood ran cold. The message was simple. The Hollow Fleet had been detected entering the New Valencia system. Estimated arrival at the colony was 72 hours, and all requests for evacuation support from Concorde member species had been denied. Yellen put her head in her hands and wept, not because she was weak, but because she was human. And humans felt things deeply, even when the universe told them their feelings did not matter. What she did not know, what almost no one knew, was that deep beneath the surface of Earth, in vaults that had been sealed for 800 years, something was about to change. Director Samuel Conkle, stood in the command center of Facility Prometheus, a place that existed in no official records, a place that most members of the Terran government did not even know about. And he read the same message that Ambassador Vasquez had received. "How long do they have?" he asked his senior aide, a woman named Dr. Chen, who had spent her entire career studying things that the public believed were myths. 72 hours until the Hollow Fleet arrives, Dr. Chen said. Standard Terran defense forces might hold them for a day, maybe two. And then New Valencia falls. Okonkwo walked to a window that looked out over a vast underground chamber. And in that chamber were rows upon rows of cryogenic pods, each one containing a human being who had been sleeping for centuries. "The Concord calls us young," he said quietly. "They think humanity appeared out of nowhere, a minor species stumbling into a galaxy of ancient powers. They do not know about the old war." Dr. Chun said, "No," Okonkwo agreed. "They do not know that when the first great darkness came, when the beings that would become the Hollow Fleet threatened to consume everything, it was not the Vrethani who stopped them. It was not the Morthic." He placed his hand on the glass, looking down at the sleeping warriors below. "It was us," he said. "It was humanity, fighting alongside species that no longer exist, giving everything we had to push back the night." Dr. Chun stepped up beside him, her face pale but determined. "The Aegis Protocol," she said. "If we wake them, there is no going back. The galaxy will know what we really are." Okonkwo thought about New Valencia, about 30 million people who had been told by the universe that they did not matter. And he made his decision. "Wake them," he said. "Wake them all." Deep in their frozen sleep, the old warriors began to dream of fire. And somewhere in those dreams, they smiled, because they had been waiting for this call for a very long time. The galaxy had forgotten what humans could do. When they had something worth fighting for, it was time to remind them. The sky above New Valencia had turned the color of dried blood, and Colonel Marcus Chun could not remember the last time he had seen the sun through the smoke. 3 days since the Hollow Fleet arrived. 3 days of constant fighting. 3 days of watching good soldiers die in ways that would haunt him forever if he lived long enough to be haunted. He crouched behind what remained of a school building, the walls still decorated with children's drawings of spaceships and alien friends. And he tried not to think about where those children were now. "Colonel, we have movement on the eastern perimeter," Sergeant Adara Nosu reported through the crackling comm system. "Looks like another wave, maybe 2,000 units." Chun closed his eyes for just a moment, letting the exhaustion wash over him before pushing it back down where it could not slow him. Downey's brigade had numbered 8,000 soldiers when the invasion began, and now he had fewer than 2,000 still able to fight. And they were running low on ammunition, running low on medical supplies, running low on hope. "Hold the line," he ordered, knowing how hollow the words sounded. "Reinforcements are coming." He did not believe it. And he knew Nwozu did not believe it either, but they were soldiers. And soldiers held the line until they could not hold it anymore. The Hollow Fleet was everything the intelligence reports had warned about and worse. Biomechanical nightmares that seemed to be part machine and part living tissue. Creatures that did not feel fear or pain or mercy. They came in waves. Always in waves, and they screamed with voices that sounded almost human. Which was somehow the worst part of all. Chan moved through the ruins of the city, checking on his remaining positions, speaking words of encouragement to soldiers who looked at him with eyes that had seen too much. A young private named Torres grabbed his arm as he passed, and Chun saw that the boy could not be more than 19 years old. "Sir, are they really coming?" Torres asked. "The reinforcements. Are they really coming?" Chun looked at this boy who had probably signed up because he wanted to see the stars and have adventures. And he did not have the heart to tell him the truth. "They are coming," he said. Just hold on a little longer. He moved on before Torres could see the doubt in his eyes in the command bunker. Chun found Lieutenant Commander Sarah Oilerin working frantically at a communications console that was barely functional. Anything. He asked Oilerin and shook her head. And Chun could see the frustration and anger in every line of her face. The Concord channels are silent, she said. I have tried everything. I have begged. I have pleaded. I have reminded them of every treaty and every agreement. And they just keep telling me that humanity must solve its own problems. Chum sat down heavily in a chair that creaked under his weight. And he stared at the tactical display that showed the Hollow Fleet spreading across the continent like a disease. How many civilians made it to the evacuation centers? He asked. Maybe 15 million. Oilerin said. The rest were in the areas the Hollow hit first. 15 million people. Hiding in bunkers and shelters, waiting for a rescue that might never come. And Chun was supposed to protect them with 2,000 exhausted soldiers and weapons that were never designed to fight something like the Hollow. Fleet, his personal communicator, buzzed. And he saw that the message was flagged with a classification level he had never seen before. A level so high that he had not even known it existed. He opened the message. And his heart stopped. Colonel Chun, the message read. This is Director Okonkwo of Facility Prometheus, authorization code Aegis 77. You are hereby ordered to hold your position for an additional 12 hours. Reinforcements are en route. Tell your soldiers that the old guard is coming home. Chun read the message 3 times, not understanding. And then Oilerin looked up from her console with an expression of complete shock. Sir, she said, I am picking up a transmission from Earth, unencrypted. Broadcasting on all channels. She put it on the speakers. And Chun heard a voice that was calm and strong and somehow ancient. This is General Isidore Reyes of the Terran Aegis. The voice said, To all Hollow Fleet forces in the New Valencia system, you have attacked our people, you have burned our worlds, and you have made a very serious mistake. Chum felt something stir in his chest. Something he had almost forgotten how to feel hope. To the brave soldiers of the 14th Defense Brigade, the voice continued. Hold your ground, we are coming. And when we arrive, we are going to show these creatures what humanity does to those who threaten our children. The transmission ended, and Chun stood up so fast that he knocked his chair over. What is the Aegis? Oilerin asked. I have never heard of them. Chun was already moving toward the door, and he called back over his shoulder. I do not know, but I intend to find out, and in the meantime, we have our orders. We hold this line. He ran back to the forward positions, and when he told his soldiers what was coming, he saw something change in their faces. Something that had been dead coming back to life 12 hours. They just had to hold for 12 hours, and somewhere in the darkness of space, a fleet of ships that had not flown in 800 years was burning toward New Valencia at speeds that should have been impossible. The bridge of the lead ship. General Isidora Reyes stood and watched the stars streak past. And she thought about all the battles she had fought, all the friends she had buried, all the centuries she had slept waiting for this moment. She was 847 years old. And she had seen things that would break most minds. And she was tired in ways that sleep could never fix, but there were 30 million humans on New Valencia who needed her. And that was enough. That had always been enough. All Aegis units, she said into her command channel. Prepare for combat drop, and remember what we are fighting for. 3,000 voices answered her. 3,000 warriors who had fought in the old war, who had bled and died and been brought back to fight again, who had never known a time when they were not at war. For Earth, they said in unison. For humanity, for those who cannot fight for themselves, Rhea smiled. And it was not a kind smile. Let us show them why the ancients called us legend. The drop pods fell from the sky like meteors, burning bright against the blood-red clouds. And Colonel Marcus Chun watched from his position on the crumbling wall of what had once been a hospital. He had never seen anything like it. Hundreds of pods screaming through the atmosphere, each one trailing fire and smoke. And for a terrible moment he thought they might be more hollow units coming to finish what their brothers had started. Then the first pod hit the ground, and the door blew off, and a woman stepped out. She was tall and muscular, wearing armor that looked nothing like standard Terran military issue. Armor that seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal. And she carried a weapon that Chun did not recognize, but instantly wanted. She moved wrong. That was the only way Chun could describe it. She moved like a predator, like something that had been hunting since the dawn of time. And when she looked at him with eyes that had seen centuries of war, he felt like a child standing before a storm. "Colonel Chun," she said. And her voice was the same one he had heard on the transmission. Calm and strong and ancient. "I am General Isidore Reyes. You have done well holding this position. Now let us finish what you started." Behind her, more pods were landing, and more soldiers were emerging. Men and women who moved with that same predatory grace, that same sense of barely contained violence. Chun had commanded soldiers for 20 years. He knew what trained warriors looked like, and these people were something else entirely. Something beyond anything he had ever encountered. "General," he managed to say. "What are you?" Reyes looked at him. And for just a moment, he saw something in her eyes that might have been sadness. "We are what humanity becomes when we have no choice," she said. "We are what we were 800 years ago when the first great darkness came. We are the Aegis, and we do not lose." A massive explosion rocked the eastern perimeter, and Chun turned to see another wave of hollow units pouring through a breach in the defensive line. His soldiers were falling back, overwhelmed by the sheer number of creatures flooding through the gap. And Chun started running toward them because that was what he did. That was what any good officer would do. But Reyes was faster. She moved like lightning, covering the ground between them and the breach in seconds. And when she reached the hollow units, she did not slow down. She accelerated. Chen watched in stunned silence as this woman, who looked like she might be 50 years old, tore through the hollow like they were made of paper. Her weapon fired bursts of energy that turned the creatures to ash. But when they got close, she used her hands, her feet, her elbows and knees, and every strike was lethal. Behind her, the other Aegis soldiers were spreading out across the battlefield, and they were all doing the same thing, charging directly into the hollow swarms with no fear and no hesitation. "They are insane," Sergeant Nuosu said, appearing at Chun's side. "Sir, they are actually running toward the enemy." Chun should have agreed with her, because everything he had ever learned about tactics said that what the Aegis were doing was suicide. You did not charge superior numbers. You did not engage overwhelming force head-on. But the Aegis were not dying. They were killing. They were destroying. They were pushing the hollow back meter by bloody meter. And they were laughing while they did it. A young Aegis soldier sprinted past Chun's position, and as he ran, he called out over his shoulder, "Stay back and protect the civilians, Colonel. We have been waiting 800 years for a good fight." Then he was gone, vanishing into the mass of hollow units, and Chun heard his war cry echoing across the battlefield. A sound of pure joy mixed with righteous fury across the galaxy. The Concord races were watching. Ambassador Cetherian of the Verthini stood in the observation chamber of the diplomatic station, surrounded by delegates from a dozen elder species, and they all stared at the feeds coming from New Valentia. "This is impossible," the Morthic ambassador rumbled. "Humans are a young species. They do not have warriors like this." Cetherian said nothing, because Cetherian was accessing the oldest archives of the Vrethini people, records that had been sealed for millions of years. And what Cytherean was finding made the crystalline ambassador's entire body vibrate with something that might have been fear. "The old war," Cytherean whispered. The other delegates turned to look at the Vrethany ambassador. And Cytherean's voice was shaking now. "We thought it was a myth. We thought the stories were exaggerated. We thought the humans who fought alongside our ancestors were just ordinary soldiers enhanced by ancient technology on the screen." General Reyes was standing on top of a pile of hollow corpses, directing her troops with calm precision. And even as they watched, she leaped down to engage another group of creatures, moving with speed and skill that defied belief. "They were not ordinary," Cytherean continued. "They were never ordinary. They were the ones our ancestors called when all seemed lost. They were the fire that held back the darkness. Why did they not tell us?" The Morthic ambassador demanded. Cytherean turned away from the screen. "And if a being made of crystal could look ashamed?" That was what the Vrethany ambassador looked like now. "Would we have listened?" Cytherean asked. "We called them young. We called them primitive. We told them their problems were not our concern, and all this time, they were the ones who saved our ancestors from extinction." The observation chamber fell silent as the elder races watched the humans fight, and on New Valencia, the tide was beginning to turn. General Reyes stood in the center of the main plaza, surrounded by her Aegis warriors. And she looked up at the sky where she knew the Concord satellites were watching. She raised her weapon in salute. Not to the Concord, but to the city around her. To the millions of people hiding in shelters waiting to be saved. "For Valencia," she shouted. And 3,000 voices echoed her cry, "For Valencia." The Hollow Fleet had made a terrible mistake when they came to this world. They had forgotten what humans could do when they had something worth fighting for, and now they were going to remember. The Queen came on the 7th day, when the Aegis had pushed the Hollow forces back to the landing zones. When it seemed like victory might actually be possible, General Isadora Reyes felt her arrival before she saw her. A cold presence in her mind that brought back memories of battles fought centuries ago. Memories of friends who had died screaming in the darkness. The ship that descended through the bloody clouds was massive. A living thing of metal and flesh that blocked out what little light remained. And when it touched down in the center of the Hollow Army, the ground itself seemed to groan in protest. Reyes stood on the roof of a collapsed building, watching the ship open like a wound. And she felt the weight of 800 years pressing down on her shoulders. "She is here," Captain Victor Okonkwo said. Standing beside her, his face grim beneath the scars he had earned in the old war. "I thought we killed her the last time." "We killed her body," Reyes replied. "The Queens always find a way to come back. They are like roaches that way." The Queen emerged from her ship, and she was beautiful in the way that death is beautiful. A towering figure of black chitin and silver metal, with eyes that burned like dying stars when she spoke. Her voice carried across the battlefield, reaching every human ear, every Aegis soldier, every terrified civilian hiding in the shelters below. "I remember you," the Queen said. And her voice was the sound of nightmares given form. "I remember your kind from the old days. The little mammals who thought they could stand against us." Reyes opened a channel to all Aegis units, and she made sure it was broadcasting on the frequencies she knew the Concord was monitoring. "All units, hold position and prepare for Phase 2, she ordered. "And someone tell this oversized insect that she talks too much." The Queen laughed. "And it was not a pleasant sound. You burned well in the old days," the Queen continued. "Your screams were music. Your fear was delicious. And now you come back for more. How delightful." Reyes jumped down from the building, landing in the no-man's land between the Hollow Army and the Aegis defensive line. And she walked toward the Queen with no fear in her stride. "You remember the old war," Reyes called out. "Good. Then you remember how it ended. You remember what we did to your mother, Your grandmother. Every queen who came before you. The queen's burning eyes fixed on Reyes. And for a moment, something flickered in those ancient depths. Something that might have been rage, or might have been fear. You are fewer now, the queen hissed. 3,000 of you against my millions. Even you cannot win against such numbers. Reyes smiled. And it was the smile of someone who had nothing left to lose. We do not have to win, she said. We just have to hold you here long enough for the civilians to evacuate. We just have to make you bleed enough to discourage you from ever coming back. She raised her weapon and pointed it directly at the queen's face. And honestly, after 800 years of sleep, I am really looking forward to making you bleed. The queen screamed, and the hollow army charged across the galaxy. In the observation chambers and diplomatic stations and government buildings of 1,000 worlds, the elder races watched what happened next. The Aegis did not retreat. They did not seek cover. They did not do any of the sensible things that modern military doctrine recommended. They charged 3,000 human warriors, ran directly into an army of millions. And they did not slow down. They did not hesitate. They did not show any sign of the fear that any rational being should feel in the face of such overwhelming odds. General Reyes led the charge, her weapon blazing, her voice raised in a battle cry that had echoed across 100 worlds in the old days. And behind her, the Aegis followed their commander into the fire. Ambassador Cetherian watched the feeds with growing horror. Unable to look away, unable to process what was happening. They will all die, the Morthic ambassador said. This is madness, this is suicide. No, Cetherian whispered. This is humanity. On the battlefield, the Aegis were dying. But they were taking hundreds of hollow with them for every soldier that fell. And they were not dying quietly. Captain Okonkwo took a blade through his chest and used his last breath to detonate a grenade that killed 50 hollow units around him. Lieutenant Chun, no relation to the colonel, held a defensive position for 30 minutes with both legs gone, firing until her weapon overheated and then using her knife until she could no longer lift her arm. Sergeant Major Adebayo carried wounded civilians to an evacuation shuttle while bleeding from wounds that would have killed any normal human. And he died with a smile on his face because he could see the shuttle lifting off behind him, and through it all, General Reyes fought her way toward the queen, leaving a trail of hollow corpses in her wake. She was injured. She was exhausted. She was running on nothing but willpower and 800 years of rage. But she kept moving forward, always forward, in the Concord observation chamber. Ambassador Cetherian made a decision. Contact my personal fleet, Cetherian ordered. Tell them to set course for New Valentia immediately. The other delegates stared at the Vrethani ambassador in shock. That violates our neutrality agreement. The Morthic ambassador protested. The Concord rules are clear. Cetherian turned to face the other elder races, and the crystalline body was vibrating with an emotion none of them had ever seen from a Vrethani before. We sat in our chambers and told these people that their problems were not our concern, Cetherian said. We called them young and weak and irrelevant. And now they are dying to protect their children while we watch from safety. Cetherian pointed at the screen, where Aegis soldiers were falling one by one. Each death a monument to human courage. I will not sit here and do nothing while legends walk into the fire, Cetherian declared. Anyone who wishes to join me is welcome. Anyone who does not can explain to their children why they chose to be cowards. The observation chamber fell silent, and then, one by one, the other delegates began contacting their fleets. General Isadora Reyes could feel the end coming. She had fought her way through thousands of hollow units. Her armor cracked and broken, her weapon long since depleted, fighting now with a blade she had carried since the old war. The queen stood before her, massive and terrible, surrounded by her elite guard. And Reyes knew that this was where she would die. She was okay with that. You cannot win, the Queen said. And there was something like respect in that nightmare voice. You have fought well, better than any creature I have faced in millennia. But you are one human against my entire hive. Reyes looked around at the battlefield, at the bodies of her soldiers, at the hollow corpses that outnumbered them 100 to 1. 207 Aegis remained standing. 207 out of 3,000. And they were still fighting, still refusing to give up, still buying time for the evacuation shuttle she could see rising into the sky. You were right, Reyes said. And she started walking toward the Queen. I cannot win. Not in any way that matters. The Queen tilted her head, curious despite herself. Then why do you continue fighting? She asked. Why do all of your kind continue fighting when you know you cannot survive? Reyes smiled. And it was a genuine smile, warm and sad and proud all at once. Because that is what we do, she said. We are human. We do not know how to quit. We do not know how to surrender. We do not know how to accept that some things are impossible. She was close now. Close enough to see the individual segments of the Queen's chitin armor. Close enough to smell the alien stench of the hollow hive. We walked into the fire 800 years ago, when everyone said we would burn. Reyes continued. We walk into the fire now, and we will walk into the fire again and again until there is no more fire left to walk into. The Queen raised her blade to strike. And Reyes did not flinch. That is what legends are made of. The blow never landed. A beam of energy from orbit cut through the sky like the finger of an angry god. Striking the Queen's ship and turning it into a pillar of flame, Reyes looked up to see ships emerging from hyperspace. Hundreds of ships. Ships bearing the markings of the Vrethani and the Morthic, and a dozen other Elder Races. Ambassador Cytherian's voice came through on all channels. Calm and clear. This is the combined fleet of the Galactic Concord. All hollow forces are ordered to stand down immediately or be destroyed. New Valencia is under our protection. The Queen screamed with rage, her plans crumbling around her. And she turned to flee back to what remained of her hive ship. Reyes did not let her. She lunged forward, driving her blade into the gap between the Queen's chest plates. And as the Queen shrieked and clawed at her, Reyes wrapped her arms around the monster and activated the fusion core buried in her armor. She had one last thought before the light took her. One last image in her mind. The evacuation shuttles rising into the sky, carrying 30 million humans to safety. It was enough. The explosion vaporized the Queen and everything within 100 meters, leaving nothing but a crater of glass where the hollow command center had been. Without their Queen, the hollow army fell apart, the creatures losing coordination, becoming easy targets for the combined fleet forces now landing across the planet. Colonel Marcus Chun found Captain Victor Okonkwo's body 3 hours later. After the last hollow had been destroyed, the old warrior was sitting against a wall, surrounded by the corpses of the enemies he had killed. And there was a smile on his face. Chun sat down next to him and wept. Not because he was weak, but because he was human. And that was what humans did when they lost heroes. 1 week later, the Galactic Concord held an emergency session. And for the first time in 10,000 years, the Great Chamber was silent when a human took the floor. Ambassador Yellen Vasquez stood at the center of the assembly. No longer relegated to the far corner. No longer ignored. The beings you see honored on the screens around this chamber were called the Aegis, she said, her voice steady and strong. 3,000 warriors who fought in the old war, who gave everything they had to save a galaxy that did not know they existed. She paused, looking around at the elder races who now watched her with something very different from contempt. They did not fight for recognition. They did not fight for power. They did not fight for any of the things that most species consider important. She raised her hand, and the screen showed images of General Reyes, of Captain Okonkwo, of Lieutenant Chun and Sergeant Major Adebayo, and 2,793 others who had given their lives. They fought because that is what humans do. We protect our own. We stand up for those who cannot stand for themselves. And we walk into the fire because someone has to. Ambassador Cytherian rose from the Brethany delegation. And when the crystalline ambassador spoke, there was no condescension in that musical voice. The Concord owes humanity a debt that can never be repaid, Cytherian said. We failed you when you needed us most, and you responded not with anger but with heroism. Cytherian bowed, a gesture that no Brethany had made to a younger species in millions of years. The historical records of the Concord are being amended as we speak. The entry for humanity will no longer read minor species of limited significance. The chamber waited in silence as Cytherian straightened. It will read Terrans. Among the first defenders, the fire that never dies. Ambassador Vasquez accepted the posthumous honors for General Reyes and all the fallen Aegis. Medals and commendations from species that had pretended humanity did not exist just weeks before. When asked to speak, she said only this: "We did not do this for your respect. We did not do it for recognition or medals or a better place in your assembly." She looked around the chamber at the 1,000 species watching her. "We did it because those were our people. And that is what humans do. We walk into the fire. We always have." In the silence that followed, the eldest member of the assembly, a being so ancient that even the Brethany considered it old, spoke for the first time in centuries. It was a creature of pure energy, one of the last survivors of the species that had first united the galaxy. And when it spoke, everyone listened. "I remember the old war," it said, its voice like the whisper of stars. "I remember the humans who fought beside us. I remember General Reyes when she was young, fierce and kind and absolutely unwilling to accept defeat." The ancient being flickered with something that might have been sorrow. "She asked me once why we fought so hard, when the darkness seemed certain to win." Ambassador Vasquez felt tears on her cheeks. "What did you tell her?" she asked. The ancient being glowed brighter for a moment, as if remembering something precious. "I told her that we fought because that was all we could do, because giving up was worse than dying, because hope is the only thing that truly matters in the end." The being turned to face Vasquez directly. She looked at me with those human eyes, and she smiled. And she said something I have never forgotten. The chamber waited. She said that humans have a word for that. She said the word is love. And that love is stronger than fire, stronger than darkness, stronger than death itself. The ancient being began to fade, its energy depleting after so many millennia. But its final words echoed through the chamber. I believe she was right. Ambassador Vasquez stood alone in the center of the Galactic Assembly, surrounded by the representatives of 1,000 worlds. And she thought about General Reyes and the Aegis, about Colonel Chun and his soldiers, about 30 million people who were alive because humans had refused to give up. She thought about Earth, about humanity, about all the times they had been told they were too small, too weak, too young to matter. And she smiled, because she knew the truth. Humans had always walked into the fire, and they always would, because that is what legends are made of.